Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the SDG Media Zone. We're here live from the United Nations. I'm happy to pass it to our moderator to kick off our last session of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone and welcome. My name is Ana Carvajosa. I'm the editor-in-chief of Planeta Futuro, which is the development section of El País, the Spanish newspaper. I'm delighted to have today with us an extraordinary panel of experts that will briefly introduce to you. On my left, it's Tshering Tobgay. He's the Prime Minister of Bhutan, and he's also an environmentalist and a cultural advocate, and he's been in office since January 2024 in his second mandate. I think that's correct. Next to him is sitting Sabina Alkire. She's the director of the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative that has developed methods for measuring multidimensional poverty, which is one of the topics we'll tackle today, incorporating different dimensions and aspects of poverty. And at the very end, it's Pedro Conceição. He's a director and lead author of the Human Development Report Office at UNDP. Welcome to the three of us. The idea today is to speak about what is beyond GDP. I think we've reached the conclusion that there's much more that can and should be measured. The question is how we want to do it, and it will be very interesting to listen from you of your experiences, because the three of you have been working on this domain for many years now, how to include sustainable development and many other factors that you will tell us about. But first, I wanted to ask to the Prime Minister about the experience in Bhutan, because your country dared to think out of the box and decided to measure progress, not just by GDP, but also through gross national happiness. Can you tell us a bit about what this index measures and how it's working? I understand you started measuring it in 2010. What have you learned in these years about this index?
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here with my fellow panelists. Beyond GDP, I think it's a very important question or a statement. What is beyond GDP? Because GDP must serve a purpose. GDP is not just for GDP, it has to serve a purpose. And that purpose must be for people, if possible, for environment. It has to serve a bigger purpose. In Bhutan, and every country will answer their own way. In Bhutan, what is beyond GDP is gross national happiness. The happiness and well-being of the people is at the center of the development agenda. So we call this gross national happiness, and GDP is important in gross national happiness. GDP is important. Material growth is important. However, that GDP must be balanced with, this material growth must be balanced with social progress, cultural preservation, environmental sustainability, and good governance.
And how do you measure that?
We have a measurement of GDP. Firstly, to measure GNH, gross national happiness, we define that measurement through 9 domains. These are health, education, living standard, environmental sustainability, good governance, time use, psychological well-being, community, and culture. So these 9 domains are measured periodically in the country. We have surveys every 5 years. These 9 domains are divided into 33 indicators, are divided into 145 odd questions. And every 5 years, we measure the GNH of the country, not happiness of the people or happiness of the country. Gross national happiness, there's a difference of the country. And the index shows that we are improving slightly every time we've measured it. We've had 3 measurements.
Good. Experience. Are there other experiences, maybe Professor Alkire can tell us a bit about her experience, to create meaningful metrics that can capture well-being, as Bhutan is trying to do?
We work internationally with many governments measuring poverty, but there's an increasing hunger to go beyond poverty and also measure well-being that captures relationships after the pandemic, that captures mental health, that captures the environment, the political governance situation, time use. And so I think we as an international community have a great deal to learn from Bhutan, because what they do is they start with each person and they say, how is your life going in each of these domains? And that means it's an actionable measure. You'd know what's going right, what's going wrong, where, for who. Then you don't have to be good at everything. It permits pluralism because we flourish in different ways. And so Bhutan doesn't require everybody to be good at everything. They put it together, and if you have a critical mass of conditions, you have achieved a kind of well-being. Another benefit is the GDP you have per country. But G&H, you can break it down by district, by gender, for children, for farmers, for corporate workers. And so you can see how different groups of the population enjoy well-being and where their deficits are, but also where their strengths are. And that, again, gives a far deeper understanding. You can do that for one period or over time. It's rigorous. It has good statistical properties, so it can be used alongside different models for the economy, for trade, for other variables. And last, I think it can really celebrate change and point out where G&H has grown the fastest and where there might be important aspects of all of our cultures, like dignity, like respect, where there have been decrements. And so we can both see what's improving and what's going down and have a conversation of what to do of it. So I think that rather than doing other measures, a more deep study of what Bhutan has already been doing under the gracious leadership that they have had is very worth doing.
And it's that, can we export that to other countries that maybe are bigger, that maybe have different religions? I mean, can we use that experience as an inspiration? Of course, it doesn't have to be exactly the same model.
No, I have to answer that. It's not meant to be exported. It's meant for Bhutan. It's developed for Bhutan, by Bhutanese. At the most, we can inspire other countries to do something similar in their own context. But obviously, we can't use it as a template. But we need to measure things that are important to life and to people that go beyond material growth. And for that, I think every society would want to have some measurements. Because if you don't measure, you're not going to understand where we are. And if you don't understand the situation, you will not be able to progress. So the short answer is, it cannot be exported, but I hope that it can inspire people to look into our story.
Philosophy, maybe not exactly how it's implemented, but the idea and, putting people in the center, and that can be replicated.
The idea does not need to be exported because it already exists. In the UN, you have Sustainable Development Goals. Much of the Sustainable Development Goals is in GNH, and vice versa. And most countries have adopted Sustainable Development Goals and understand the importance of Sustainable Development Goals. And whether poverty, hunger, living standard, they're all, and environment, they're all in GNH.
Mr. Conceição, you run the Human Development Index of UNDP. These goals Prime Minister was speaking about, they haven't progressed as we expected or as we would have liked. Where should we put our efforts now, seeing what we're seeing?
Thank you, Anna. Before addressing that question, can I share a few reflections on how we think about what does it mean to go beyond GDP
Go ahead.
in our own work? So I think it's important to go beyond GDP in three ways at least. And we've already heard from my colleagues here on the panel about these directions that are important. So the first one, as the Prime Minister said, the economy matters a lot, but we need to go beyond the economy, beyond economic performance, and have a broader understanding of well-being. So for example, the way in which we present the Human Development Index, all the multidimensional poverty index, goes in that direction, going beyond the economy, beyond income. The second aspect in which it's important to go beyond GDP, and Sabina alluded to this, is that we need to disaggregate. We just cannot present a number and assume that that number describes the reality of a country. There are lots of disparities across the territory, so we need to go beyond averages and look, for instance, at things like gender inequality. And the third way in which we need to go beyond GDP is that GDP is a flow. GDP is gone. It's what happens during a year. It doesn't tell us anything about we live to the future. So we need to go beyond today and have indicators that tell us the extent to which we are taking care of ourselves and are taking care of our planet. So it's important to embed also indicators of sustainability. So Growth National Happiness, the work that we do with Sabina, goes in some of these three directions. Now, to your question briefly, I think one of the things we've realized in recent years, but it's obvious to all of us, is that a lot of the lack of progress has to do with things that are not within the controls of countries. So if a country, even a country, undertaking all the perfect policies, perfectly designed, could be subject to things like a pandemic, that's a global problem, or to climate change that is beyond the control of any single country to solve, or to a conflict that is happening far away and not necessarily in the country. So I think that one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we're struggling with progress has to do with our inability as an international community to manage these shared challenges. And that's why it's so important that on Sunday, the United States member states agreed on this Pact of the Future, because it's something that tells us not so much on what we should be aiming towards, because that's in the SDGs, that's in the metrics that we're discussing, but I think that we need to do our homework on the how. How are we able to come together within countries and across countries to address these shared challenges?
We have very little time, unfortunately, but I just wanted to ask you one question to whoever wants to answer of something you mentioned, the climate emergency. How has it changed the equation of what we have to measure and with which urgency? I mean, because the situation was very different 10 years ago and 5 years ago. Where are we now and how this changes what we're speaking about?
So one of the ways in which it has changed is that the climate crisis and development were seen as two separate issues. More and more, we're recognizing that the two are coming together in two ways. First, in the fact that the people that are suffering more deeply, more quickly, and more intensely the consequences of climate change are often, not always, but often those that are already more vulnerable. So you see the implications of climate change potentially driving inequalities and exacerbating poverty. The second way in which it is related is in the response. So as we look towards the future of our economies that are likely to be decarbonized based on renewable energy, if we look at our opportunities for livelihoods, for jobs, those are likely to be in the way in which we also address the transition towards renewable energies and towards a decarbonized economy. So there are opportunities there to create jobs, enhance livelihoods, and reduce poverty.
I would say very briefly that I think thinking about going beyond well-being is important, because if you could think of a new set of metrics that brought together things that are deeply meaningful to people, it would release a lot of imagination, a lot of energy, a lot of hope, a lot of novelty, and we might find new solutions to intractable problems. And so I think trying to carry this conversation forward to learn from the leadership, the vision, and the real imagination in Bhutan is a way to unlock energies that would address the climate crises, but also other kinds of hunger and need that we have for culture, for relationship, for psychological well-being. Over to you.
You want to add something?
Just to thank you
Yeah.
for getting us together and to talk about something, to discuss something that's very important for all our peoples. The sooner we go beyond GDP, the more progress we are going to make as a society, as a world.
Thank you so much. I mean, this is really a fascinating topic and with a very interesting panelist. So thank you very much for being here today. And please, everybody, give a round of applause to our guests.